In recent memory, there have been some huge cinematic reveals that just fell flat. Whether it was something fans had waited years to find answers for, unwanted and unnecessary twists, or having a reveal come after everyone had already figured it out. More than a few times, audiences have been let down by something that was supposed to be mind-blowing. And so, with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with the 10 most underwhelming reveals in recent movie history. Number 10. It was all about generic mind control in Spiderhead. Released on Netflix back in June 2022, Spiderhead appeared to have an interesting premise at the very least. Prisoners on an offshore facility underwent chemical tests in order to potentially shorten their sentences, though the endgame of such tests was never fully revealed, leaving an air of mystery to proceedings. Despite the wonderful cast led by the ever-charismatic and charming Chris Hemsworth, you have to look no further than Rotten Tomatoes to see how poorly the movie was received. A 39% critic score and even less from audiences doesn't make for pretty reading. There are plenty of areas you could point to for where this went wrong, but the predictable and underwhelming story is a major one. In particular, the reveal that behind everything was Steve Abnesti's goal to create and sell to the highest bidder a mind control drug. Over the course of the film's events, he uses the likes of a love drug, a torture drug, and something of a laughing gas drug, as well as many others on his bingo card not demonstrated on screen. Unfortunately, the reveal that all of these were only used to prove that his B6 obedience drug worked was a poor twist. The movie could have taken so many different parts, but the one it chose was simply too generic to be enjoyable. Number 9. Vulture's role in Morbius. The twists, turns, and crossover potential of the Marvel Cinematic Universe used to be some of the franchise's greatest appeals. Now, however, after a wildly inconsistent Phase 4, such aspects are beginning to become a crutch in the eyes of many fans, who are becoming more and more weary of the shared universe. Timelines become convoluted, and the whole thing becomes difficult to follow, particularly when the multiverse gets involved. This has stretched as far as Sony's SSU, which at first appeared to be separate from the MCU, but then Michael Keaton showed his face in the Morbius trailer. In the build-up to one of the biggest Marvel bombs in recent memory, there was intrigue as to how Keaton's Adrian Toomes turning up would work. Was he affected by the events of No Way Home? Was Morbius actually set in the MCU, since the trailers went so far as to reference all 3 iterations of the character? The reveal itself was more than underwhelming. It was pitiful. Clearly going for something of a Sinister Six tease, the Vulture apparently turned up in Morbius's universe and just decided that he wanted to team up with a bunch of other bad guys for literally no reason. This was just lazy and actually insulting to the Marvel fans. Number 8. Maisie was a clone in Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. In spite of the absurd amount of money made by its predecessor, the sequel to Jurassic World didn't exactly inspire much love from audiences. This was just the latest chapter in the franchise's long fall from grace since its iconic 1993 debut. From nonsensical plotlines to cartoonesque characters who were seemingly evil for the sake of it and willing to sell dinosaurs to the highest bidder for as many zeros on a check as possible, there wasn't much to get excited about in this movie. In particular, there was one thread running through that was incredibly cringeworthy, namely the mystery of Benjamin Lockwood's granddaughter Maisie. Making the shift from cloning dinosaurs to cloning humans could have been interesting had it been done differently, but this just came across as laughable. By the time Maisie was revealed to be a clone of her mother, after several unmissable and obvious hints were dropped, audiences couldn't have been less shocked or surprised. The reveal had been telegraphed all movie long, leaving the big revelation to fall flat. Number 7. The killer reveal in See How They Run. The opening minutes of See How They Run build certain expectations for audiences that unfortunately the rest of the movie simply couldn't live up to. Leo's voiceover takes some shots at murder mysteries by saying if you've seen one, you've seen them all. It's a brave way to start a murder mystery movie. There is, however, a thin line between bravery and stupidity. The movie almost set itself up for failure by putting down the entire whodunit genre. After an opening like this, taking shots at the likes of Agatha Christie, it simply had to come up with something special itself. Unfortunately, however, after the movie put pressure on itself to be better than any other whodunit, it wasn't. Adrian Brody's character explained exactly what would happen halfway into the movie, and it wasn't difficult to piece together what would happen with Stoppard and Stalker. Foreshadowing and subtle hints are one thing, spelling it out for the audience is another. Then there is how the actual reveal came about. What was the point of having Stoppard and Stalker chase the killer all this time, only for him to voluntarily confess to a room full of people for no reason anyway? If you compare this to the likes of Glass Onion and other whodunit movies that are apparently all the same, this ending couldn't have been less satisfying. Number 6. ZURG'S true identity in Lightyear. More so than ever before these days, the movie industry is obsessed with shared universes, spin-offs, sequels, and prequels. While the likes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars have typically, if not consistently, done this with great success, not every other franchise is quite so successful. Even the likes of Toy Story, one of the most undeniably popular series in movie history, isn't exempt from the kind of pitfalls that come with such shared universe expansion. Though the sequels all did exceptionally well both in terms of reception and at the box office, Lightyear did not. The premise of being the movie within a movie confused many, and if we're being brutally honest, it just wasn't something anybody needed. All it did, aside from force people to question where Tim Allen was mess with the Toy Story lore and canon. Zurg had long since been confirmed to be Buzz Lightyear's father, way back in Toy Story 2, but for some reason Lightyear decided to retcon their relationship so that the villain was actually Buzz himself from the future. This made absolutely no sense, and it's like the writers of the movie paid no mind to what had been established in the movies before them. The few that did go to the cinema to see this film left confused and massively underwhelmed. Number 5. Michael Myers is barely involved in Halloween Ends. Halloween, along with the likes of Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street, is one of those horror movie franchises that just doesn't seem to want to die. Since John Carpenter's iconic movie back in 1978, there has been an astonishing 13 movies released. As part of this, the latest 3 movies have acted somewhat as a trilogy in their own right, with the closing chapter coming with Halloween Ends. With a name like this, you'd be forgiven for thinking this was going to be some big final showdown between Michael Myers and Laurie Strode, the two characters that have been fighting each other for decades. Aside from the movie's very final title was the trailer. This didn't do anything to subvert audience expectations of a final showdown between the franchise's two greatest characters. Instead, however, fans got to the cinema to find that Michael Myers was barely in the movie at all. In spite of what the trailers showed, the focus shifted to an entirely new character, Corey Cunningham, leaving Michael on the bench for the majority of the movie. Now let's be honest, was this what anyone wanted going into the film? Would anyone have even paid for a ticket knowing what they were actually going to see? Number 4. Taskmaster was DREYKOV'S daughter in Black Widow. Like every other movie studio in the world, Marvel Studios was hit hard by the global pandemic of 2020. Schedule reshuffles, production delays, and more meant that between Spider-Man Far From Home and the first episode of WandaVision were 18 long MCU-less months. Black Widow was one of the most affected movies. Originally supposed to open Phase 4 in May 2020, Scarlett Johansson's swan song kept getting put back and put back. This led to fans having nothing but the trailer to get them by for a very long time. In this time, the mystery of who was behind Taskmaster's mask may have been built up to more than it would have done otherwise. How could it not? It was essentially the only thing MCU fans had to cling to at the time. Regardless, Natasha Romanoff almost wasn't the biggest draw of the movie when it eventually released. It was finally finding out who was behind the mask. Since the MCU purposefully avoided showing the character's face, and with them using several different characters' styles in the marketing material, there were some great fan theories that were born. Most of them would have been a damn sight better than it being DREYKOV'S daughter, an underwhelming character that fans had never even met before. Number 3. Goose scratched Nick Fury's eye in Captain Marvel. There are some incredible characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but there is one who simply cannot be competed with when it comes to being cool. Director Nick Fury, like Samuel L. Jackson himself, oozes cool, and part of that came from the mystery of his backstory. From his first appearance in the post-credit scene in Iron Man, Nick Fury has consistently donned an eye patch, and for many years there was absolutely no explanation for it. Fans were given a glimpse into his history in The Winter Soldier when he said that the last time he trusted someone he lost an eye. If there was one sentence that could have made his mysterious injury any more enticing, it was this. Answers were all but assured in 2019 when Captain Marvel took MCU fans back into the 90s when Fury first met Carol Danvers. Who did he trust? What did they do to him? The answers to these questions could have been amazing, but the reveal was that he was scratched by a cat. And with the shoehorned clunky dialogue that he trusted the creature with the Tesseract, cue a collective groan from audiences everywhere. Number 2. The return of Emperor Palpatine in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. In the long history of Star Wars, there have been immeasurable twists, turns, and of course one of the most shocking revelations in the history of cinema. More recently, there have been far less fondly remembered moments that seem to be included for the sake of it. The sequel trilogy, in particular both The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, were a mess of overlapping narratives almost trying to outdo and retcon each other. This led to some shockingly poor reveals: how Rey's parents were nobody important, the subsequent reveal that Palpatine was her grandfather, and that Supreme Leader Snoke meant absolutely nothing. You could even stretch this as far as how Han was given his surname in Solo: A Star Wars Story. But the most underwhelming by far revolved around the return of the Emperor himself. After the disappointment of The Last Jedi, fans were down on Star Wars in general, but that unmistakable cackle of Palpatine was enough to pique interest in the Rise of Skywalker's trailer. How could the big bad of the original trilogy have survived to play a role all these years later? The answer was about as lazy as it could have possibly been. He was announced as still being alive with absolutely no explanation in the opening crawl of the movie. Even later, the explanation reaches little more than the word somehow, in what was frankly an insult to fans of the franchise. Number 1. Credence Barebone is a Dumbledore in Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. As a movie franchise, Fantastic Beasts spiraled downhill fast after the success of Eddie Redmayne's debut as Newt Scamander. The once charming addition to the Wizarding World suffered issues both on and off screen, to the point that reaching the initially planned 5-movie total now seems impossible. Part of the reason The Crimes of Grindelwald lost fans was the changes it made to Harry Potter lore. The work of J.K. Rowling is as good as sacred to many people, and these changes were far from welcome, least of all the revelation of Credence Barebone's real name. As the conclusion of the second movie, Gellert Grindelwald, after 2 films of trying to manipulate Credence, told him the truth, that his real name was Aurelius Dumbledore. It was further confirmed that he was the son of Albus's brother Aberforth. This felt like the writers were going for a big twist just for the sake of it, whether or not it made sense to the story, the characters, or the lore. This achieved nothing but pissing off fans and putting one of the final nails in the franchise's coffin. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.